and bring it back west. She does not reach the water. The horsemen run her down at the river's edge, and the chains go on her wrists, while the current she needed is still in front of her, close enough to see. The war is over. She lost it at the river. Her name is Zenobia. 18 months earlier, she ruled from the grain fields of Egypt to the coast of Anatolia. She had declared her own young son an emperor. She called herself the equal of Rome, and for a season the map agreed with her. Now she is a prisoner of a contingent of cavalry, and the empire she challenged has a rule for women like her. The rule is old, and the rule is simple. Every rebel who threatened Rome on this scale died. They were strangled in the dark of the Tullianum prison after being paraded through the city. They were displayed as severed heads. They were made into examples, because the example was the point. Zenobia was not. The emperor who caught her, a hard soldier named Aurelian, broke the empire's oldest rule about rebels and kept her alive. This is the story of how one provincial queen forced Rome's most disciplined emperor to break that rule, and what being the exception cost her. 3 years earlier, she had not been a prisoner. She had been the most dangerous person in the Roman world. Palmyra was a caravan city, set in the Syrian desert on the trade roads that ran between Rome and the east, and the trade had made it immensely rich. It was, on paper, a Roman possession. Zenobia's husband, Odeionathus, had been Rome's strongman in that part of the world, the man who held the Persian frontier through the years when Rome's central government was tearing itself apart in a long stretch of civil war and collapse. Around AD 267, Odeionathus and his elder son were killed. Zenobia stepped into the space they left, as regent for her own son, Varbalathus, who was then a small child. For a short while, she governed the way a regent governs, holding a seat for a boy. Then she stopped. In or around AD 270, a Palmyrene army marched into Egypt. Her general, a man named Zabdas, led it. The Roman prefect who tried to hold the province, Tenagino Probus, was defeated. And in Alexandria, the great port that fed the city of Rome itself, the harbour went quiet. Consider what that silence meant. Alexandria was where the grain fleet loaded. The heat came off the Nile Delta in waves, and the air in the harbour district carried the smell of the grain warehouses. Thousands of tons of wheat waiting on the docks. The ships that should have been hauling that wheat west to feed 1 million Roman mouths stayed tied up at their moorings. They did not sail because the woman who now controlled the docks had not given them leave to. Somewhere east of that harbour, Zenobia received the news that Egypt was hers, and she understood exactly what she had just done. Taking Egypt was not expanding a kingdom. Egypt was Rome's bread. To hold Alexandria was to put a hand around the throat of the capital and feel the pulse there. She would have known there was no walking this back. A regent who seizes the imperial grain supply has not made a bold move in a negotiation. She has made herself unforgivable, and the cold thrill of that would have come with a colder thing underneath it. The understanding that every road from here ran toward a Roman army. She gave the order anyway. For about a year, Rome did almost nothing. Zenobia read the silence as permission. It was not permission. It was an emperor finishing other wars first and clearing his hands. If you want more history told this way, the story underneath the one in the textbooks, the subscribe button, is what keeps these documentaries coming. A queen with her hand on Rome's grain supply is exactly the kind of history that gets buried under a single sentence. We are about to watch Rome turn east. Stay with it. The emperor was Aurelian, and he moved fast. He crossed into Anatolia and pushed south. One of his commanders retook Egypt and reopened the grain. And then Aurelian met the Palmyrene army in the field near Antioch at a place called Imme, and there he sprang the trap that would define the entire war. Zenobia's heavy cavalry were called cataphracts. Horse and rider both were armoured, plated head to flank, and in a straight frontal charge they were close to unstoppable. Aurelian did not meet them head-on. He ordered his own lighter cavalry to break and run, The cataphracts gave chase the way heavy cavalry will, and the Syrian sun did the work for him. Inside that armour, in that heat, at a gallop, men and horses cooked and tired. When the Palmyrene charge had spent itself, Aurelian's infantry turned and destroyed it. Zenobia pulled back. At a mesa, he did it again. The same feigned retreat, the same exhausted cataphracts, the same slaughter, and this time it was decisive. Zenobia had left her treasury in a mesa, and now she lost it. She retreated inside the walls of Palmyra itself, and Aurelian followed and put the city under siege. Inside those walls, the supplies thinned, and no Roman offer of mercy came through the gates. So Zenobia made a decision that tells you everything about what kind of ruler she was. She would not wait inside the city for the end of it. She would ride for Persia herself, reach the Persian king, and bring an army back. She went out through the siege lines at night, on a camel, into the desert she had been born to read better than any Roman in that camp. Consider the few hours that followed. The desert night is cold, and the wind carries grit that finds the eyes and the mouth. There is almost no sound, only the animal breathing under her and the soft fall of its feet in the sand. Behind her, getting smaller, the firelight of the Roman camp she is gambling she can outrun. And inside her, a particular kind of dread, the dread of a woman who has never once in her life been powerless, now measuring everything she is and everything she built against the speed of a camel and the width of a river. She is doing the arithmetic in the dark. The arithmetic is bad. She clears the siege lines anyway, and for a few hours she is free, and the gamble is alive. This is the last stretch of Zenobia's life in which she is still a queen and not a prisoner. Everything after the Euphrates is aftermath. She was caught at the river, and here the story that Rome handed down to us begins to come apart, because what happened next survives in versions, and the versions cannot all be true. After her capture, Aurelian sent Zenobia and her son to Emesa to be tried, and with them the leading figures of the Palmyrene court, including the celebrated philosopher Longinus. The accounts that come down to us, the Historia Augusta and the historian Zosimus, say that at that trial Zenobia broke. They say she blamed her advisors, that she threw her own counsellors to the wolves to save her own life, and that Longinus was among those executed because of it. That is the story Rome preserved, but there is no contemporary account of that trial, not one. Every version we have was written later by Romans for Roman audiences, and a cowardly Zenobia, a queen who betrayed the men around her the moment she was cornered, was extraordinarily convenient for Aurelian. A traitorous queen gave the conquered Palmyrenes no hero to gather around. The cowardice may be real. It may also be propaganda doing its job, and we have no way to separate the two. This is the deeper problem with Zenobia. The woman who ruled a third of the Roman world survives almost entirely in the words of men who never met her, writing to flatter the dynasty that beat her. We do not have her voice. We have Rome's edit of her voice. Even the most famous thing about her lineage, her claim of descent from Cleopatra, the last queen of Egypt, reaches us through that same filter, though the claim does seem to have been genuinely hers. An official declaration issued in her son's name called Alexandria her ancestral city. She was telling the world she was Cleopatra's heir. Whether the blood was real almost does not matter. The claim was a weapon, and she chose to wield it. And there is physical proof of how carefully she played the longer game, proof that outlived every chronicle. Before the open break with Rome, coins were struck in Antioch and in Alexandria, showing two faces together, her son Vabalathus and the emperor Aurelian side by side. Those coins are a queen negotiating her son's legitimacy in metal inside the Roman system, testing how much the system would tolerate before she stepped outside it entirely. When she finally did step outside it, Vabalathus was proclaimed Augustus, a full emperor, Rome's equal and Rome's rival. The coins mark the exact moment the negotiation ended. So the question this leaves is the question the rest of her life answers. Did Aurelian decide to spare her, or did Zenobia make herself impossible to kill? Whatever was said at that trial in Emesa, the answer was delivered in Rome, in a single afternoon, in front of the entire city. The year is AD 274. The triumph of Aurelian moves through the streets of Rome toward the Capitoline Hill, and walking in it on foot ahead of the emperor's chariot is Zenobia. Not riding, not carried, walking the way a trophy is walked, alongside another captured ruler, the Gallic usurper Tetricus. According to the Historia Augusta, which gives us the most detailed account of that day, though it is a source with a known appetite for embellishment, she was loaded with gold, chains of it, jewels, ornament, so much weight of precious metal that she could barely walk under it, and guards had to hold the chains up so she could move at all. Around her, the roar of the Roman crowd. Above her, the Mediterranean sun, full on a desert queen who had been turned into a parade exhibit. On her wrists, gold, on the same wrists that 2 years earlier had signed orders to armies. And the crowd knew the script. Every Roman in that street knew how a triumph ended. The captured enemy was displayed, walked the length of the city so the people could see the thing their emperor had beaten, and then the captured enemy was taken aside to the Tullianum and strangled. That was the ending. Vercingetorix died that way after Julius Caesar's triumph. Jugurtha died that way after the triumph of Marius. The walk through the city was not the punishment. The walk was the prelude to the punishment. The crowd lining those streets was waiting for the ending it had always been given. Follow the route as she walked it. She is a queen who has been converted into an object, weighed down with the engineered, glittering proof of her own defeat, and she is moving toward the Capitoline, knowing what waits at the Capitoline. She has watched Rome do this before. She knows the cell at the end of the route is where people like her stop existing. The stake is not the gold, and it is not the crowd. The stake is the not knowing. She walks the entire length of the city, believing each step is a step toward her own execution. And she has to keep walking it, upright, under the weight, in front of all of them. And then Aurelian does not kill her. He walks her the length of Rome, and at the end of it, he spends the empire's oldest rule about rebels, in the open, in front of the entire population that had come specifically to watch him honor it. He spared Tetricus the same day. He would later give Tetricus a government post. The mercy was not an impulse, it was deliberate, and it was a strategy, and Zenobia was its centerpiece. The chains came off, and what Rome did with Zenobia after the triumph is stranger than what it did to her during it. The dominant tradition holds that Aurelian gave her a villa at Tibur, the town we now call Tivoli, in the fashionable green hills outside Rome, the same district where the Emperor Hadrian had built his own enormous villa generations before. She was not erased, she was settled. It was the same clemency, again, that he had shown Tetricus. But by the time she lived there, something had already happened that the quiet of the place could not soften. While Zenobia was being moved toward Rome, Palmyra had revolted a second time. The city rose, and it killed the Roman garrison Aurelian had left inside it, 600 archers and his appointed governor, by the Historia Augusta's count. Aurelian turned his army around and went back, and this time there was no clemency at all. He destroyed the city, the walls, the temples, the streets, the people. Palmyra, the city Zenobia had ruled, the city she had ridden out of, in the dark on a camel to try to save, was a ruin a full year before she ever reached her villa in the Italian hills. So she is there, in the garden, living with that. There is birdsong, there is still warm air, and the cool of stone in the shade, and the ordinary quiet of an afternoon in the hills outside Rome. And inside that quiet is the knowledge that the empire whose garden she is sitting in is the same empire that wiped her city off the earth. This is the asymmetry at the center of her survival. Aurelian's mercy was only ever for Zenobia. It was never for the place. The woman was spared and the city was annihilated. And both of those decisions came from the same hand in the same war. She survived, and the price of understanding her own survival was holding it in the same body as Palmyra's destruction, in the same quiet room, for the rest of her life. She got the gentler mercy and the harder knowledge at once. What came after for her was a Roman life, though the details blur. Later writers claimed she remarried a Roman senator and that her daughters married into Roman families, though modern historians treat the remarriage as a thin and dubious late embellishment, probably grown out of the better attested fact that her descendants did survive in Rome. Varbalathus, the son in whose name she had ruled an empire, simply disappears from the record after the defeat. He may have died on the voyage. He may have been quietly executed because he was male and he had been proclaimed an emperor, and that combination was dangerous. The record does not say, it just stops. And here is the trade laid out plain. Aurelian got both halves of what he wanted. He got the image of a conquered queen, walked through his capital in gold, and he got a reputation for mercy that cost him nothing he valued. Zenobia got her life. Both of them paid for the arrangement. She paid with her crown, with her city, and with her son's line. He paid by breaking a rule of the empire that he could never afterward unbreak. And that hill town is where the trail goes physical, because Zenobia did not vanish into legend. She left a bloodline, and it can be traced in stone. In the Syrian desert, inscriptions still stand that name Zenobia and her son Varbalathus, cut in the Aramaic script of her own city. Those are her monuments, the version of herself that she authored, in stone, before Rome ever wrote its version of her. They are the queen in her own words. And then there is the other end of the trail, in Italy. A Roman inscription survives carrying the names of her family line, the name Septimia, the dynastic line of her husband Odeionathus, names that belong to her household. And the 4th century Roman historian Euphrates wrote plainly that the descendants of Zenobia were still living, as Roman nobility in his own time, a full century after she walked through Rome in chains. Jerome records the same thing. Some have even suggested that a 5th century bishop, Zenobius of Florence, was a distant descendant of hers, though that thread is a suggestion and not a record, and it should be held as lightly as that. Set the two places side by side, the desert ruins of Palmyra and the green hills of Tivoli. Both still exist, both can still be visited. The stones in Syria say she was a queen. The stones and the records in Italy say her blood became Roman, settled, ordinary, absorbed. Both are true at the same time, and the contradiction between them is the whole story. Because here is the quiet, unsettling thing underneath all of it. The single most successful thing Zenobia ever did was survive, and she survived in a way that made her disappear. Her descendants carried her name and lived Roman lives in a Roman city. The empire she had tried to break did not destroy her family. It became the thing her family was. Which leaves one last question, the one the gold chains were always really about. Go back to that image one more time. The queen in the triumph, weighed down by the most detailed accounts we have, with more gold than she could carry. Ask what the gold was actually for. It was not decoration, it was an argument. Rome needed Zenobia visibly defeated and visibly alive in the same moment, because a dead Zenobia was a martyr the Palmyrenes could rally to, and a free Zenobia was a threat that could ride east again. But a Zenobia turned into a wealthy Roman matron in a hillside villa was something better than either. She was proof that the empire could conquer anything, even a will as hard as hers, and not just conquer it, but absorb it, dress it in gold, and retire it to the hills. And even now, we cannot tell you for certain how she died. Zosimus says she never reached Rome at all. That illness or self-starvation took her on the road. Malala says she was beheaded after the triumph. The dominant tradition says she lived out a long and quiet life at Tiber. 3 endings. They cannot all be true, and Rome left us no way to choose between them. So we close where the evidence still stands. Not in a chronicle, not in a contested account written by men who never met her, but in stone, in the two places her life actually touched the earth. In the Syrian desert, the city of Palmyra still holds her inscriptions in the sand. Her own name, cut in her own script, in the Aramaic of the city she ruled. Stand in front of one of those inscriptions, and you are reading the version of Zenobia that existed before Rome got to write its version. The queen in her own words, in her own hand, in the place she chose. And far to the west, the hills of Tivoli still hold the tradition of her, the green Italian district where the empire settled her when it was finished parading her. Two ends of one life in two countries, separated by the whole width of the Mediterranean. And neither of them is the dark cell of the Tullianum, where Rome's own oldest rule said a rebel queen was supposed to end. Hold that distance for a moment, because the distance is the verdict. Every rebel who came before her on this scale died at the close of the triumph, in the dark, by the cord. That was the ending Rome wrote, again and again, because the ending was the lesson. Zenobia got a different one. She got a garden. She got hills. She got a long quiet that the strangled men before her were never given.